The first performance domain that we are going to evaluate related to tailoring is the stakeholder performance domain. We're talking about stakeholders. So let's have a look at the performance domain stakeholders. When we look at stakeholders, we have to evaluate it by asking the following questions. Is the environment between stakeholders and suppliers collaborative? Here we have to see how well are we collaborating with suppliers. And when we have a bad collaboration or we have to follow certain processes, we can evaluate how to improve, how to adjust the stakeholder processes to comply with the actual situation. We look also at the type of stakeholders do we have. We have internal, external, or mixed stakeholders. Communicating with internal stakeholders is easier, but once we have external or mixed stakeholders, then it becomes more complicated and we have to evaluate the processes to ensure that the communication between all the different stakeholders is optimized. Certainly when we have external or mixed stakeholders, because there may be some barriers that we have to pass. The next element to evaluate is about the best communication technology we would want to use and what is available. We may need a specific communication technology, but is it available and how do we communicate? Certainly when we're talking with internal, external, or mixed stakeholders, how can we communicate? Because we cannot share information from our organization with external stakeholders. Here are a lot of things that we have to consider. We may have some links, some access to certain databases for the external stakeholders, or we may want to have some access to the databases of the external stakeholders. We have to manage this and set up processes that this can be done without any security breaches. Languages and a dictionary, when we talk with people or when we have different, nationalities or languages that are being used, we have to evaluate how can we deal with this. We have a lot of projects in English. Even English words may be different when you look at British English, American English, Australian English, and other types of English that are spoken over the world. Even with Dutch and Flemish, we have the same elements. Some words mean something completely different. When we are using different languages, we also have to ensure that the people exactly understand what we are talking about, and a dictionary may be very interesting to have. When we're dealing with different languages or different uses of languages or variations of languages, a dictionary explaining what we mean with a specific term would be something very interesting to have. When we look at stakeholders, well, complexity increases with the number of stakeholders. Look at the communications lines. When we have a lot of communication lines, communications become a lot more difficult. We also have to consider what are the total numbers or what are the communication lines and what are the official communication lines. Communicating with stakeholders becomes more complicated when we have more stakeholders to communicate with. Cultural differences may be very important. We may have different habits in different countries, and just look at Japanese people, the way they share, for example, their business card. It's very respectful. While in other countries, we just look at it and we put it away. Or here in Czech Republic, for example, when you say skål, when you share a beer, you have to watch in each other's eyes and things like that. So there may be some cultural differences, like saying yes or no, for example, in Japanese, that we have to take into consideration. We also have the relationships with the stakeholder community. What are those relationships? How do they influence the processes and the cooperation? And we also have to look at the complexity of the network or the different networks of stakeholders that exist. So that's it for the stakeholder performance domain, the different questions we have to ask in order to evaluate how to tailor the stakeholder performance domain. In the next lesson, we will be looking at the tailoring of the team performance domain. That's it for this lesson. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in our next videos. Bye-bye.